tasting as well as the
It's not like this, it's just the one empty glass.
just the way smoke. I'll party fun.
Simon.
Hello. How are you?
Simon.
It's quite exciting to be here. Got lots of roosters. Is it? Have you seen just laughing? Anna said you wouldn't be mean to me.
I said we're not.
I'm going to tell the principal again.
We're not as. Did I use? I can't even remember.
She said it when she had her fingers crossed. Doesn't count then, does it? Yeah.
Did make a comment that we're not as hard to deal with as we've been in the past.
Unless we're naming streets.
Unless we're naming streets.
Yeah.
And they're so serious. Streets.
What?
So you take that off the
That's one thing we retain for it.
Take it off. Take it off yourself. It's fine.
They'll spell it wrong. So you know that.
How fun was my voice look road?
Yes, Neil, the floor is yours for your statement that you would like to make.
Thank you, Anna. I've advised the councillors, so they will know this, but I'd like to tell the board members as well. It's not public information or knowledge, but it's probably going to get there eventually, but I'm not going to make it that way. So,
Neil, we're in public meeting.
are we?
Yeah, workshop.
Yeah.
All right, I'll do it afterwards then.
Okay, cool.
That'll keep you wondering. I knew that.
You knew that, did you? Okay. So this isn't our, of course, our meeting. This is a workshop around delegations. I'd like to welcome Tamer and congratulate her on being as our new mayor. A double-edged sword, no doubt, because you have to take it over mid-term and put your own stamp on the position over the next year. So welcome, congratulations, and we really look forward to working alongside you over the next year and possibly well into the future.
Very nice.
Very nice. So, Wayne and Saskia, it's your show.
And it's over to Wayne to lead us through.
Well, welcome everyone. So I sent everyone the. I've worked up a starter based on what council decided the October meeting. Oh no, September. I've lost
September.
Oh, September. At the September meeting, when they resolved for bits and pieces to do with digitisation, although we don't use that word anymore, do we? We use
funding model.
district funding model. I tried very hard in my email not to use the word. I actually started hunting for. There actually is a word to describe a new word they've made up for communications, but yeah. So what I said is what I think the delegations need to change to. And I sent also two questions out for everyone to ponder. Do you think that the changes there that I've made, and I sent the original, the way it's now out, do you think the changes fit in with what's been resolved by council? And secondly, are there any things that you think are missing that should be mentioned? So essentially, I just wanted to throw open the floor to see if anyone have any comment on those. What, you know, are they looking pretty good? Are they nowhere near where you think they should be? Are they nearby but need a bit of finessing? Or is there something that's really, really missing? So yeah.
Just for the questions, I probably just would like to add is we reflected a lot on the earlier conversations this year when we first brought the delegations paper back in February, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Wayne, And what Wayne has in the re-looking at it has not included the power, only the powers that, but also the powers to advise, because what you saw back in February was quite slimmed down, and there's a lot of questions about the role of the community board going forward, etc. So we have, Wayne has really thought about it, and we have included that section there to, I think, more fully represent what a community board does.
Thank you. Neil, you had something that you wanted to say?
I just wonder if it would pay to just go through what it currently says to what the proposal is, just sort of, I know it's a bit line by line, but I think it's probably the best way to make sure that we get a chance to have considered and asked questions that are focused on the particular changes that are making place, because I think it's going to be important to understand that and then just realise for all of us and the wider community as to how significant the changes are or are not, for that matter.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good suggestion. Is there any way that we can get them screened side by side, or are people able to put it on their own screens side by side? Depends on what sort of device you're on.
Could be a bit too far for an iPad.
I've got both of them now. Printed
Yeah.
out.
Why don't I fix the map? Yeah.
I did mean to do that, but I was like,
If we print out the slide, which is what it is right now, and then everyone can have the other one
Yeah.
up on the screen.
Quite handy being on Teams, having two screens. Just saying.
Just saying, you've got yourself well set up.
Right up there, but it's really nice.
Yeah, I've got both on my screen, so I can see them. You okay? You can- Okay, so we can probably quite quickly get through that first page because there's not a lot of change there. The first page is pretty much what it says in the Local Government Act. So number 47, 48, and 49 are unchanged.
yeah.
They're all as
Yeah.
as is.
I think just, that was just setting up,
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
it's the community board.
So
That saying that,
on page second page.
Onto the second page, I've made the change to reflect the representation view that each board will have one appointee from council. I've done that because really these are taking it from the start of next financial year, because obviously nothing's going to stop between now and July or into the financial year. So I changed it to that. I don't think there was anything changed. I don't think we had changed anything in the objectives. Yeah, we might have got these from the and I've just started with power to act in the current version of the delegations and changed it to power to advise. That's basically where we'll start.
So my question would be, is that act and advise, you know, the ones that are under advised are about making recommendations, and that is an action of the board as well.
Well, the way I split it up was the delegated authority as opposed to a sort of like we got to say, well, hey council, we want you to do this, or this is our advice to council, as opposed to the power to act, which I would think would be, we can do what we want because this is our stuff.
Power to act, well, power and act go together as two words. Power and advise don't really.
Yeah.
Advising is not power. It's a responsibility, and I guess it's some sort of right. But not a power.
And I might be being a bit picky, but the clause 47 says the boards are established under section 49 and exercise such powers as are delegated to them. So I think that is an action. It is a power to, everything is a power to act. It's about whether it's in terms of a recommendation or a decision. And I just think that these are all powers to act. With Wally in that camp, I don't think it's a power to advise. We get powers delegated to us, and those delegations will say what we can and can't do. So I don't think that, you know, all the things that are delegated do are powers to act, to take some action.
But so what you're saying now is you think about getting rid of that one which is power to advise, making it power to act, and then just in the other ones, making it clear that they were advisory functions as opposed to. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I am, because if you go and take the first one, for argument's sake, which is the authority to make recommendations on works for roading and bridging programs, that's exactly the power we're given. The power to our action we can take under the powers delegated is to make recommendations. So I think, you know, it just, yeah, you know, Wally's right, powers to advise, and I think that it's also consistent with what the Act says. You know, we work under powers that are delegated to us. So the council delegates us the authority to make recommendations, and we can only do what we have authority to do.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
So is that going to remain?
No, I think that's quite a reasonable idea to change around. Yeah, I think that makes total sense.
So
But it would, I mean, they're probably saying much the same thing, just without that sort of title.
Yeah.
I would imagine.
And I don't think you can say that under that power to act, the council expects. Now, the council's delegating here. This is a delegations register, so it is a delegation. And the delegation is to make recommendations. And that's consistent with what the Act says that boards are there to do, to act under delegations given to it by council.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean, Neil.
is that little sub under the heading, council expects that issues related to each ward need to take out the word that.
Yeah.
If there's community board input will be considered by council. So
the reason that I put that there was, you know, there's an expectation that things will come before a community board with the stuff in their ward. That's sort of an understanding. And I was trying to set up a thing where I say, like, it's an expectation that at the council meeting, a councillor could say, what does the community board think of this? And that could be told.
yeah.
So that's what that is.
So do we need the council that, or do we just need it to say issues related to each ward where practical? That's one of those words very nice to say.
Yeah.
Have community board considered by council.
I would think if you had Neil's described it, he wouldn't need it at all, because it's about to act. So
okay, so then we don't need to
away that because
so do we need the other statement then that you've got that's under the existing words? The council delegates to the community boards the following functions, duties, powers and discretions as they apply to their respective boards, subject to any delegations made by the council on a district-wide basis.
I believe so. I think that is quite appropriate for what we've got. That's one of the reasons why I said at the outset, you know, the perceived changes are not, you know, some of them aren't that significant, and they'll come later on where it clarifies the real role of council and the real role of community boards, just to make sure it's quite clear. So I think that power to act is exactly what the Act says that we should be doing here, and that sums it up quite nicely.
So the things that fall under that are potentially different, but the
yes.
The thing itself is the same thing.
Yeah.
does it reflect the things that we have been in terms of how we work as a community board in ensuring that our views and voice are taken to council?
Something just clarify for me. For anything that involves both community board and council, like to this point, there's been a community board recommendation to council that's had more weight than we're probably going to have moving forward. But in terms of staff interactions and meeting process, there's still a report goes to a community board. Community board makes a decision whether it's a recommendation or otherwise, which then goes to council. So the touch points with council staff and preparing reports and recommendations is all the same workflow, right?
Yeah.
So there's been no efficiencies gained there.
I think it might be that, and it's not for this training, but for the next training, the sequencing of councils and community boards might need to be looked at, because at the moment there is a bit of a disconnect there. So the papers go to community boards and then they go to council. Well, and then, you know, there's a 6-week gap between community boards. I don't know what the solution there is, but to enable a more efficient flow, we might need to have a look at that meeting frequency and the sequencing.
Yeah.
But there will still be, in fact, I mean, I think it's a valid point. There's probably a requirement for potentially more papers to come to community boards. Because in the past, roading matters and those things that have already been treated as a district-wide responsibility have probably bypassed community boards to an extent. And this is like the roadworks here, all those things that are really problem. Yeah, I think I think there's a little bit more potentially now from an efficiency point of view. It means we're going to have to be thinking well in the head of when a decision needs to be reached by to be able to meet that timeline. That lines of work. What do you think, Saskia?
Was planned, and Rodan, of course, already had set the budget with Waka Kotahi, but I don't recall again conversations at the board level. Hey, this is what's planned in your district or your ward, sorry, for the South UK. So definitely, I agree with Peter. I do think there is, especially as we get the right rhythm and we're making sure that we're living true to the new delegations. I can see that there will be more papers and discussions for the board. So it's going to be particularly to the executive team to make sure that we're thinking forward and making sure those conversations are happening and the papers are prepared in advance so that they're coming here first before they're going to.
And remember, it's through the 1st of July.
Yeah.
New delegations. So we're still operating under the current authority.
Yeah. So in a Cromwell context, if there's decisions that need to be made about the Bannock Brown Road industrial land, there'll be a report comes to community board will advise on appointing contractors or something, or just the way that the pattern of development potentially.
Yeah,
And that would be a recommendation to council for the council to make a decision.
well, an example of that is today in that paper that's coming to community board. Obviously, the community board can't make the decision on disposal of the land because that's still a council decision. But I think that's an example that had changed effectively. That, you know, as we work through the development of that plan, the team that will be taking that council to the community first, get a sense check. Does this make sense? And so on and so on. Much like what we'll test today.
Yeah.
Okay, so I suppose that one of the things that this board was quite keen to ensure was that those things came to meetings, not just to workshops. so that when you're bringing them to community board, that they're actually included on our agenda, even if they're essentially a report for information and discussion, that we're still, it comes within the meeting, not in what the community may consider to be informal settings like workshops, so that it's recorded in the minutes that we've had that workshop, we've had that report.
Yeah.
brought to us. Yeah. So is that intention clear in these delegations? No, but yeah. Neil,
You may want to make a provision around endowment potentially.
yeah,
Yes, that's what I'm getting to.
So as a line item in there, council advice around. But, you know, so you could specifically add that in. I mean, all community boards have endowment.
absolutely, yeah.
And actually, endowment, and as we work through the significant engagement policy, we've sort of listed it as a strategic asset. It's still for council to make that decision. So it sort of elevates it up the total policy.
Neil, did you have something?
Your mind's a little bit about the structure of the delegation, and what I'd like to see is a consistency in the wording that's used for each of the powers that are there. So yeah, if you look at what's currently there, and please, I'm not criticising what's happened because it's hard to take it from one document into a new one, but I think for consistency going forward, it would make sense to have things like, or each one should start with in relation to, because when you look at number 2, the authority to recommend, well, that's what the delegation is for. It just seems to me we should have a consistent sort of formatting or convention for how each of the various powers are listed. And then what I think is that what follows from that is that then they would be reflected in the council's delegations, so it's clear that there's a pick up Anna's point, then there's a clear way that how it formally gets to there, and there's a consistency in what the boards are delegated to and what the councils would do with stuff that comes their way, just to provide that connection. And then I think also that a really good point is it's important to say that we should pass resolutions to make recommendations. That's the way to get around the issue about workshops in particular, to make sure it is a formal process. But I'd just like to see a convention that provides for some consistency and then feeds back into the delegations that council have, just to provide that connection, because I think that'll enable board members, but then the wider community also to see that there's a very clear path for how things are being processed to get from the community level to the council table. Hopefully that makes sense.
It does make sense. I just don't know how you put it in this doc.
Well, the good thing is you don't have to do it now.
So-
I would have thought today's about sort of letting Wayne and the team and others to have a think about is that a valid comment to pick up and how could it be done, and will it make a more readily readable document for everybody concerned. But I just think the consistency of language, the conventions used to state the things to progress it through, and the good point that Peter just made about the endowment land and how you would provide for that as well, to make sure it's quite clear what the board's role is there, and in that particular case that it's that the board would make a recommendation based on the purpose of the endowment to make sure that council then goes and does X, Y, Z, A, B, C. Yeah, that's my sort of tenor of how to do it. Not now, but I think that if it makes sense, it shouldn't be. Some very good staff would know how to turn that into the right sort of document.
Yeah. Just a thought around, does there need to be something in there that allows for governance structures to be established for large infrastructure projects within each ward that might include community board voice as well? So I'm thinking about that we've got a governance structure, say for the town centre, that means that the board's quite closely involved in any decision making there. So I'm just thinking like it might not be us, it might be Bridges in the Maniatoto, or something completely different. It might be something that's happening in one of the other walls, but where there is quite a significant project or something happening that there's opportunity for the relationship to be strengthened through, like we have established for the town centre, or essentially what's happening with the whole project where it's very much where it becomes quite a localised project, but obviously still needs council to approve any recommendation. but that community board voice is sought in quite a formal way. Does there need to be something in there that allows for those structures to be established on where there's projects of significance to the community? I mean, I'm not talking about naming a road, I'm talking about big things, so.
I think that's good.
Yeah.
In short, are you suggesting that a community board person could be appointed to a otherwise council committee of the same standing?
Potentially.
Hmm.
That's one governance structure that might allow a strong community board voice in that particular project without it being the whole board, without the cumbersome nature of coming to the whole board for, you know, in that 6-week cycle that's offset from the 4-week cycle, and when a committee might be meeting about that. Yeah. So just
The onus is on that person at that point to determine the board view to go to those interactions.
If I draft something up and run it back by you to see what you think.
I mean, you could either repeat paragraph 6 and write paragraph 7 and change that language and just reflect endowment land. Keep 6, but then add a specific.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's beyond that. It might be a project or an infrastructure build, so that is going to have a significant impact on the community, and the community is likely to ask people on the community board what's happening with that.
Oh,
You know,
I
it's to be-
think all three of those were different in a way.
Yeah,
So you'd have, well, you know, like the property transaction, like, hey, we know about building X, and you know, might be quite a good idea to get that building, and then that one, then one specifically talking about endowment land. That's like endowment land, anything else that you thought, and then something to do with maybe being part of reference groups or whatever for CapEx project.
So we don't actually have an infrastructure you know,
no,
and we have a finance that makes, but because we're reporting now to audit and risk and to council, that sort of infrastructure group ceased. Oh, and it was really built around Three Waters, wasn't it? But so
you don't really have that group at the moment, but that doesn't preclude it from happening.
I mean, there's no subcommittees other than the audit and risk. That's the only subcommittee of council and the chief executive committee.
Yeah, we've got the portfolios, but not those officially committees, yeah.
But it's nothing like what you're saying with an infrastructure.
Will some of that come out of what happens as we work through land strategy stuff?
Right.
When we start talking that,
Yeah.
that might lead to, well, for these, you know, because that's where you're going to have those conversations about what does that look like.
Yeah, and the other thing to think about is you know, we won't have it right now, but you know, at some stage in the future we might. So it'd be useful to have a provision for if it was going to happen, and it seemed like that was a good way to go, sort of like a good way to go. We'll have it in there, and then if it's triggered, it's triggered.
But just in terms of that, we set up the PHE, but it was more like a sounding board and then no authority to speak for the board.
Yeah.
When you're talking about if you're setting up a subcommittee, that person.
No, I don't think I'm necessarily talking about if there, I mean, if there is already a group or if there is, because we do, because there was quite specifically set up for town centre. Once we stopped having PAGs, because we felt that we were just doubling the number of workshops you were running, so you're running one for the PAG and then you're running one for the whole community board anyway, that we actually said, well, for this particular project and decisions that are being made here, this is a partnership project because of the nature of it. And so therefore setting up a partnership approach. And I know there is always a partnership approach, but quite specifically saying this is a project that needs a partnership approach. I don't know.
I think we can think about it.
Yeah.
This way we can.
Just, I mean, the whole district is growing.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's going to be projects and decisions that communities want to have really strong say in over in the next 30 years, aren't they, across the whole district.
So when we start realising money from Bannockburn Road, But community board never had full autonomy, right? So that was never a risk to council. But it'd be good to move towards some autonomy, spending proceeds of that in Cromwell. So I think that sits with the board nicely. But the caveats on that would be that as long as it's not contrary to any previous agreements, like when the hall got across the line, the pressure was on to get money from there to pay the hall, right? So we're not going to go spend it on something else. But then at what point, I mean, what is the risk to council of a community board going rogue? And how can council?
That's quite risky, I would think. Well, I don't think there is, because of the structures that are set up. I still think you always have had that fallback position where council actually make the ultimate decision. And because you've got a larger group and you've got all wards represented, the ability to shut down completely rogue behaviour has always existed. Hasn't always been, that power hasn't always been exercised, has it? But it's always existed.
So in that context, I mean, I don't know why we have to change anything, really, right? Because the power never fully sat with community board, is it?
No, it's always.
No, but I suppose it is to clarify, because our delegations did, you know, in terms of number 9 in the original document, that negotiate the acquisition and disposal of council property within the community board's jurisdiction. Well, it's not going to be as strong as negotiating, isn't it? It's going to be recommending or having a say in, or somehow being involved in providing opinion on. Whereas that whole negotiate gave us powers to tell staff to do property negotiations. We're not going to have that level of delegation.
But should we? What's the risk to council?
But I ask what's the risk to the community board, because at the end of the day, should, as has been highlighted before, that when the Bannockburn Road does start making a profit, that money can be then used for the district by way of loan. Once that money's gone, how does then the Cromwell Community Board sit around and say, well, hang on, we want to actually use some of that money. We're down the pecking order now. We have to wait. What priority or what value is going to be put on the comments coming out of the community board versus the council?
I wonder, because we're going to drag up something here around the recommendations on the endowment land. I can see exactly where both of you are coming from. I wonder if that's best dealt with through the land strategy piece of work, and through the development of that piece of work that we're going to kickstart today, that we get clear the expectations from the community board. We work out that piece of work around, you know, the areas of investment that you'd like to see when there's profits. It then goes to what's we've got a bit of shape. It goes then up to council saying, hey, this is what the community board would like to see when the endowment land is realising some profit. These are the key areas of investment, and then council at a strategic level sign it off. And obviously, as we go through LTPs, we might need to come relook at it, but it gives us the basis as to this is what the community board really genuinely believe the best investment in the Cromwell area for that money is, because it's quite clear by that the endowment that it must be used for the betterment of the borough. So I think that's probably the mechanism. And
I agree that is the mechanism to deal with that. That when we have, so we're talking about Bannockburn Road particularly, but we're also having going to be talking about a land strategy workshop. And I think that, you know, if we feel assured that there's going to be the opportunity that reports are going to come to us that give us the opportunity to put feedback in, that then goes to council for decision making, and whether it's recommendations that we're making or whether it's we're getting information reports, we're then giving feedback to staff that we put to go on council reports for decision making. That should give us a structure to do that. And I suppose it's at what I suppose what you're coming to is how much say when it comes to that negotiate the acquisition and disposal of council property. It's probably more about working alongside council and establishing strategic plans about the use of property.
Weight.
Yeah.
Voice has.
Well, these delegations need to point to that document, though. So if we're saying that other document will cover it, these delegations need to point to that document in some way, shape or form.
Well, I think that one that we'll develop up to bring back is around the power of the recommendations on the down that we'll cover that if we have a specific wording around that.
So
It would still be only to advise that
Only visual.
Yeah.
it's under law. Council cannot delegate that, so
yeah,
it's just thoughts cannot acquire, hold, or dispose of property
Yeah.
and endowment land is
Yeah.
property.
And I
Just
suppose,
in terms of ownership, not the dealing of it.
Only but in the decision making,
Yeah.
the rights will sit with council.
yeah, and I guess that's up to the councillors, to really think about the importance of the community and the weight that they need to place on your recommendations. So I think that's probably a really good conversation for the mayor to lead with her councillors around the way we're going to work in the future.
Neil.
I think it would be dangerous and not appropriate to have any links in a delegations document to other documents that don't sit part of the delegations register process. I think the important thing is that if this document's worded the right way, the council document then picks up on it and also has the two-way street that recognises that council won't run itself rogue and go and do things without having talked to the board in the first place. So I think you can deal with the issue that Wally's raising by making sure that the delegations for the council recognise the fact that it won't just go and do its own thing without talking to the board either. In terms of, and that's probably in a preamble type thing or in the objectives or whatever, to make sure it's quite clear. But I don't think you could use this document to refer to a strategy because that strategy can change, and then your delegations register changes by default, and I don't think that would be the appropriate way to do it. I think the other thing you get to be very clearly understanding is that ultimately the council can still makes that decision, and it's got to be informed on that decision from somewhere. And if nothing else, these delegations that come to the board need to be what's telling the council, informing the council, and informing, dare I say, ultimately the report writers, because a report would come to the board first. And then it would go to council, but it may well not be just go a rinse and repeat of what went to the board, because the board might have information and feedback that then has to go to council to consider as part of that process. And the staff recommendation may not change, but the council will receive the resolutions of the board as well going through. So hopefully that might help allay some of those sort of concerns. That the two parties will ultimately keep each other honest and through effectively what is it's delegations, but it's really probably going to be a partnership more than anything else. That's probably too strong a word, but a relationship by which we do things and follow best practice.
I think that under the limitations for authority, some of that is covered, where it says the community board has a responsibility to ensure its policies, actions and decisions are always within the overall strategic plans, annual and long-term plans, policy guidelines and priority programs adopted by the council. So when that strategy is established, if we're working within that strategy, then that's what informs how we go about making decisions around that. And of course, yes, strategies, policies, procedures all change over time. So I think that probably covers it. It's probably not numbers 11, 12 and 13, however. So the other part, if we're looking at the whole thing being power to act, but the power to act is that we can give advice or we can recommend or provide input or monitor, then those ones that come under the next bit, it says power to act, which is grants and donations and road naming and the provision of community board chairs to speak at all council meetings. Do they need to go at the, therefore, be bumped up to the top of the previous section?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Essentially, it will all just become one.
Yeah, but because they are actually the things that we've got clear action to take. Do they need to be popped at the top of the front of the queue? Exactly.
Yeah.
Because we love a good road naming practice.
You should have some notes.
Yeah, the answer is yeah. We'll put.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
And just, can I just go back to one thing that's in there? It talks about bridging and roading programs. I guess it's about getting and then the next one in the proposal has works programs. Whether they should all just be in one list rather than separate roading and bridging from the parks and reserves and that sort of thing. At the end of the day, they're all one and the same. So, you know, I'm not sure. Do we need to just, you know, bring them out? Otherwise, do you have a separate one for parks, separate one for reserves? You know, it just seems to me that we could, in your power to act, you could have a in relation to the following council activities, whatever it is, and list them there to make sure that the list is quite clear.
Yep.
We know what that list is because it's in our how we report in our annual plan and how we prepare a long-term plan. So they're all there. So it should be a reasonably simple matter of providing a list and then again that certainty, and it's a bit easier to read as well.
Do you think 1, 2, and 3 should be as well?
Yep, I don't see the point in having separate things unless there's something different about what the board's power to act is. Otherwise, there should just be a bullet point list, so it's quite clear, I would have thought.
Yeah, so that becomes number 4 with bullet points under it.
Yeah.
I mean, when looking at these, at both the documents, I think that it's, I don't see any huge glaring issues or omissions. It's just, it really is just about tweaking and ensuring that there's things that are there. And of course, it's taken out some of the definites about board budgets and stuff like that that are no longer going to be part of what we're looking at. So I think that the exclusions that have been taken out fit with what we know is how we're moving forward. But I think that what's been the inclusions seem to still give us lots of scope to have clear voice in the things that are going to be important or that our community and our board think are important moving forward. So I think we're on the right track. It's my ultimate feeling.
And I think further that actually reflects what actually happens today anyway. So that's the big thing about this, is my view, is that the council's always had that power. We were only able to make recommendations into to stuff that was budgeted and approved by council. And all we're doing is just reinforcing that in a different way. And the council's not giving us the sole delegation to say once you've done your budget, you get a free hand. And I think it just makes it clearer for everybody going forward. I made that comment at the start. I don't think the change is that huge. The big change we've had is about where the funds come from stuff. That's the huge change. This board is still going to have a lot of power to act on behalf of its community, and the council can then choose to listen to it or not, and that's a different conversation.
Yeah, because it's all still clearly there that we can give recommendations on the priorities for works within the community ward. You know, that those things still exist under what you've got in this document at this point. That the input into the annual plan and the long-term plan stay, that we can make those recommendations about maintenance and facilities and amenities within our board, that we're not hamstrung from being able to say that things need to be done or to make those calls. So
Got one slightly unrelated, sort of related question. Is there a framework around how council is going to appoint the councillor to the board? Has there been any thought about that?
It's a discussion in there.
it's choices.
So in the last this training, I think it was by number of votes that they got as a council.
I think that's.
I think that's right, isn't it? But actually, the answer actually is whoever they want.
Yeah.
Is that something that the community boards would like to say, hey, we want the person who got the most votes, or would you like to have the person who's most willing to attend all the meetings, or the most engaged person, or did you want
It's a really hard one, isn't it? Because how do you rank?
Yeah.
Recommendation for the training.
Well, tough. Could get some maverick bouncing with 5,000 votes somewhere, because it'll be a super competitive interview process. Who knows? Every option is there.
You go.
Most votes is necessarily good indicator that was in a person.
I just think we have to be conscious about this, that we have actually thought about this.
It's significant, there's one. There's a lot of work to do for that role.
Yeah, like it'll be a first right of refusal at the very least, I think.
Yeah.
Because the
The capability,
might be
I think
like.
you're likely to,
So,
you may find, I mean, at the moment, for the Cromwell ward and probably a little bit for the Minster ward, there's an assumption that you're going to be on the community board, and therefore there's a disappointment if you're the person who's told, sorry, you didn't make the cut. Whereas this is probably, you know, this is a completely flipped model on that. So you're actually looking at which councillors want to be on the community board, who's actually got the capacity for those additional
Capacity's a big
meetings.
one.
And, yeah,
It
and
is, yeah, so that's the
Who's
first
actually-
right of refusal
Yeah.
thing, like if you just say it's gonna be the most votes, someone might accidentally get the most votes when they were hoping third.
I'm sure this permission in the legislation, that the person has to be willing.
Yeah, good.
I'm pretty sure.
But also, I mean, if you look at the workflow, you know, the work that's already, the workflow, if you like, and the projects that are on the table for the next, say, 3 years, then it would also be good to look at the ability of the person that you would actually, would it be a nomination or what? So because if you want somebody that knows, that has expertise in a particular area, then that's the person that you will want on the community board to represent this community back to council.
the thing is, you don't know from one election to the next who's actually going to be sitting around that table. We've got no idea who's going to put their hand up at the next election. We've got no idea who's going to end up on this board.
No, but one would hope that the mayor would actually know once she has seen who has made it onto the next community board and onto the council. She'll have a fairly good, I would have thought, idea of their strengths and weaknesses. And if there is, like we've got the, you know, the town hall, if there's somebody that is got those particular expertise, then I would have thought that that would have been the person that would have been appointed, as opposed to 1, 2, or 3 in terms of the ranking of votes.
Yeah, I think the ranking of votes becomes less important in this
Yeah.
next conversation because it is just the one person.
I mean, I do understand, you know, people will put their hand up and say, yeah, you know, want to be on the community board. And it's going to be really hard as to who, you know, 3 down to 1. So it's really important that that one person has a really good grasp and is going to be the voice of the community board back at the council level.
And it's the time to do all the back work as well,
So,
because there'd be equal amounts of work in community board and council some weeks, but the
Yeah.
pay is quite disparate for the extra that person gets.
yeah.
The community board.
You think
Mary
about
has
the whole,
a,
City's quite.
sorry, Wally, we'll go Wally, then Mary.
you think about the whole for this triennium, it's quite construction related.
Yeah.
Next triennium is going to be the arts related. I'm almost stronger in construction than the arts, for example. So that's where you've got to look at.
Yeah, that's what I was sort of
Strengths.
looking at.
Mm.
You know, if you've got the expertise, that's the person that you want there,
Mm.
you know. So, well, I would have thought.
Mary.
Yeah, just alongside what Shara was saying, it seems to me like, so how many, has it been decided yet how many how many Cromwell councillors will end up on the council next term? Is it 4 or is it 5? 4, yeah.
Or-
So like, is there the ability to kind of like a Winston Seymour arrangement potentially where you share it? Or I mean, yeah, just I mean, I'm not sure how competitive it is really, but potentially just all sit down and discuss the pros and cons and potentially, yeah, who would be the strongest person to do both roles justice.
I don't know, I think if you're actually looking in terms of sharing, I think that cause inconsistencies, you know.
Gets difficult.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I'd be less likely. Yeah, I think that would be quite difficult to say, oh, okay, you do this part of the training, you do this part of the training, you know? Unless you had
Lose ground in the middle.
Unless you had 2 specific projects, like one was construction and design and all of that sort of thing, and like you say, one was arts, and you wanted to complete that project, you wanted to see it through. I mean, I think that's something that would be quite tricky unless you had 2 different, more than that, projects on the go.
I
then
think
that's-
what you know about anyone who's put their hand up for elections to council or community board is that they're interested in making a difference to the ward that they've stood in. So you should be able to say that any one of the 4 councillors would be a suitable candidate to be on a community board.
Yeah, but there are different levels. I mean, for example, you can talk to your technical terms. I haven't got a fucking clue. You know, what those, so if you know what I mean, you know, and so that does make a difference as to who could.
Yeah.
But it'd be no good if he was fired, but he was so busy in his job doing all of that.
Yeah,
stuff.
definitely,
You
yeah.
go to meetings and you could.
But hopefully it wouldn't show it. You wouldn't put your hand up for. Say,
But understanding the workload.
If you couldn't do it, if you didn't have.
Is critical for that person.
Yeah.
That's where we've got to do the work. I think next.
Because you'll have, this time standing, you'll have people who are standing purely for council. At the moment, in the last 2 elections, there's been an expectation that if I stand for council, I'm likely to be on the community board as well. Whereas that won't be the expectation this time. So I think that. let council-
Just a couple of thoughts.
Yes,
The
have thoughts?
problem you've got is that the board can't elect a chair until the council has been appointed back.
Yeah.
So there's, you could consider that as being a way to do it as well, but that's not going to work either. So you do really have to rely on the mayor, depending on the lay of the land, with who's elected, to work out, the most appropriate person. Ultimately, don't look at that position as being someone that's going to go to the council table and advocate for the board, because they can't. That's not their job. They're there for the whole district. So the issue about the connection to the board is going to be handled by the council through the fact now that the chairs on a roster come to talk to council and tell them what's happening. And now we're going to see a whole lot more reports that are going to a board first and then to the council. So I think that the question about the councillor that's appointed back to the board, it's more likely to be what they're doing is bringing the council big picture back to the board rather than the other way around, because the other way around is not consistent with what you're required to do as a councillor. So I don't think there's a lot we can do about it, and until we see the royal we and the new council, the new mayor, see who they have to pick from and who wants to be involved, there's not a lot more that you can do than that, I'm sure, though, that if you look back and let's just say for argument's sake that the same 4 councillors get voted on and the same 4 community board members are elected and the same mayor's there, they know each other, they can work it out. It won't be a difficult process, and we'll get a good outcome. But the reality is it won't be the same councillors. It won't likely be the same community board members, and it may or may not be the same mayor. You just can't make anything for it, and to date we've been served quite well. It was easy when you put all 3 back. That made no issue. And the thing to bear in mind is that Vincent have seemed to work it when they've had to put 3 out of 5 back. So it seems to have worked through a process as well. So I think we shouldn't get too worried about it until we see what happens, until whoever's here and elected in 2025, and they can work it out, and good luck to them.
Okay, we've only got a short time left in this workshop. Are there any points that members want to give to staff who are preparing this report, preparing this draft before it, any other? Now's your moment.
When will we see this again?
Wayne.
I'm hoping to, we're going to take this to regularly on Thursday for Manitoba. Then hopefully I'll talk to council on the 13th about all the changes that we've seen, and then it'll come back to council in December. But before then, I think it'll come around the community board. So that's what we've come up with.
Okay.
And it'll probably be later in November. By the time I've got.
But the council decision will be the December.
It's a December meeting, correct? Yeah. Really?
After we've actually seen, you circulate it.
Yeah.
And if there's any further points or anything, we can just. Anything like that, is that going to be still possible at that stage?
Actually, why not?
So you're happy to keep.
Yeah.
Developing
I can't see why not, because in the end, you would get to the council table and that's rubbish. Start again.
So we have a meeting.
So basically,
December, so we're likely to see the the draft.
If you're being consistent to the delegation, the new delegations register,
Yeah,
you're going to
that'd
have it that way so that it does come out that the board will make a recommendation to the council. And the problem if you don't do it that way here is you're going to have our preliminary views. 3 more boards are going to put some views in that we're not going to be privy to unless we get to see a final paper that we can recommend to the council or provide our input on. You're probably defeating the purpose of what we're trying to achieve.
And then I would plan to come and speak at the final meeting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll just need to, our final community board is the Manitoba Community Board on the 12th, Thursday the 12th, which is when Wayne would traditionally pull the agenda together and get it out to the council. So we'll just take that offline to make sure we've got Manitoba's recommendation. So it goes public on Friday, the day after the Manitoba meeting. So keeping our internal process there, but
And the meeting's the 18th of December, is that right?
Yeah, 18 December.
yes, correct.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. We've given you heaps.
I've written down heaps of stuff. I've got some really great ideas. I think I can add. Yeah.
And I do think that in terms of overall, I think that we are on the right.
And going in the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's half the battle, actually. To make sure that everyone thinks that we're sort of getting in the right path. And we've certainly learned a great deal since February on this.
That's an understatement.
All right. Thank you very much. I think that it is now time to wrap up this workshop and move on to members only time over food.